Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local government. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your public information skills. Your host, Robert Tornabene, is a public information officer with over 10 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. In each episode, we will explore different aspects of the public information officer profession. So sit back and enjoy this episode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we are with the Public Affairs Coordinator from the Walton County Sheriff's Office. This is Corey Dobridnia, and she is going to be talking about a lot of interesting stuff. But first, I want to find out, Corey, you are the Public Affairs Coordinator. How'd you get your start there?
That's a great question. So I was recruited out of television broadcast news by my former chief deputy and now sheriff in Franklin County, AJ Smith. And really, it was a great story because it was all about relationships. So when I was a reporter, I really enjoyed covering law enforcement, and I covered some murders and a murder trial in Gulf County for Sheriff Michael Harrison. And I just built a really great rapport with him and really enjoyed covering those stories over there. And I would joke with him, if you ever need a public information officer, just remember my name. And eventually Chief Smith at the time, they were looking for a public information officer, and he went asking his sheriff buddies, and Sheriff Harrison suggested me. So they gave me a call and asked me to come speak with Sheriff Michael Atkinson. And the rest is history. I've been here 6 years.
Wow. Well, hey, that's a great story. So you're a recovering reporter.
I'm a recovering journalist. I tell people that regularly. And people are like, are you ever going to not be recovering? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I still have flashbacks.
That's awesome. So your department, you've done some really innovative stuff. I've been going through your social media page for especially your Twitter feed and stuff, looking at what you guys have been doing. Can you give the listeners an example of some of the things you've done?
So I think the biggest one is Sheriff Atkinson and I opted to do Sheriff Live Q&A sessions on social media. And while I don't suggest that for everyone, it really fits for him. He's great on his feet. He's a very articulate speaker, and he has great ideas and does really well with towing the middle of the road. So whether you're a conservative or a liberal, he really wins both sides of the aisle over because he stays middle of the road. And while I wouldn't really recommend that for every sheriff, it works really well for him. And we take questions from the audience, and I ask them as they come in. That's won us a lot of great feedback from the community because they feel like they know him and they don't feel like we're going to dodge questions. And it gives them an opportunity every other week to hold us accountable.
So you're doing this once every other week? So
we try to.
Twice a month, basically. Nice.
Yeah. So I used to just do it on Facebook. And then for a while, we were doing it on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We've consistently done it on Facebook for about 4 years. Maybe not every other week we try to, but depending on his schedule, it might turn into like once a month, or we'll do it like 3 times in a month, and then we won't do it for, a few weeks. But yeah, it's been pretty consistent on our social media, and people enjoy that.
So are they responding via they're typing a message in? Is that how they're doing it?
Comments in the comments. So
okay.
They ask questions right there on the live stream, and if we're getting a bunch, we'll stay on there for 2.5 hours. If we're not getting many, we might go an hour or 45 minutes.
Oh, so there's no designated time frame. Wow.
Right. We start at 5:30, and if we're busy, then we go for it.
That's amazing that he's willing to give that much time. That's awesome.
He jokes constantly, like, we don't get paid overtime. So like, this is what we do. I mean, if you need us to stay and you're asking great questions, then we'll hang out. We work 24 hours a day. So that's what the public expects from us. And I think that they appreciate that.
All right. So you've already mentioned Twitter and Facebook, and you mentioned Instagram. What else do you guys have?
Ooh, that's a great question. We've got Nextdoor, which I love. Shout out to Joe Porcelli, because he's like the best social media liaison that I know. Nextdoor is great also because we can target our messaging. So If you folded our county on top of itself, it's like Mars and Jupiter. Like you have peanut farms in the north end, and then in the south end, you've got multi-million dollar homes. So for our residents, like people in the north end don't necessarily care about the same things that people in the south end do. So Nextdoor gives us a really great opportunity to target messaging that wouldn't necessarily be relevant to a different demographic in our jurisdiction. We also have Snapchat. We also do YouTube. We have TikTok. I mean, between Walton County Fire Rescue, which is also under us, and Walton County Animal Services, which is also under us, I manage about a dozen social media accounts on top of everything else I do.
All right. So this leads me into my next question. You're not a one-man operation or one-person operation, are you?
I have one other PIO. Her title is Public Information Officer, and she covers Walton County Fire Rescue. And I constantly say, if I didn't have her, like my life would be so chaotic. And when I first got to the sheriff's office, we didn't have fire rescue. We took them on later. She was originally hired as like an internal, communication specialist to kind of help me. And then her role kind of developed into that PIO role for the other side of the house. What I will say is, and Sheriff Adkins and I have had these conversations, we're a 600 plus member agency. We should have more than 2 people. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot, but he has 2 very capable people. So it makes his life a lot easier.
Well, that's impressive. 2 people for an agency that size and for the community that you have and
Sure.
what you guys have to deal with. That's impressive.
Yeah. Like I said, without Lindsay, her name is Lindsay Darby, she really just polishes our approach, and it's good to have her under the same roof.
So you guys use Nextdoor and you're targeting the neighborhoods. So you're sending individual messages. How are they received? Do they like that? Do they like the targeting of it?
I think so, because Nextdoor allows us to do like emergency alerts too that specify certain neighborhoods. So let's just say a perfect example is a rash of burglaries. For example, if we have a rash of car burglaries, I don't want to tell people in Paxton that, right? So I'm going to target within 2 miles of, where our spree is. And I'm going to let those residents know, and they're going to receive a text message on their phone if they're signed up for it. And they can say, oh, wow, like I didn't realize this was happening. And then either they recognize that, oh, I'm a victim too, or they see our messaging like, oh, I got to remember to lock my doors at night. So I think that they do appreciate it. I'm constantly getting feedback from the community. We really appreciate your transparency. We really appreciate you communicating with us on this level. And we try to do it with a little bit of grace, a little bit of professionalism. The feedback's not 100% of the time positive, but for the most part on Nextdoor, we've got a pretty great following, and people appreciate our messaging and transparency.
I really like the platform. I really used it heavily when I was in my other agency, and I'm a big proponent of agencies using it. Some are afraid. I don't know. Some think it's too private, maybe, and I don't necessarily understand. That it's just residents only, and they don't like that.
Right, and I think that's more meaningful when it comes to like making sure that your engagement is organic to your county. I think as a PIO, we get too tied up in going viral and not really understanding why that's important. Because at the end of the day, for a sheriff's office, we are an office of the sheriff. He is elected. My job is to get him reelected. So is it relevant that somebody in Iowa thinks I'm funny? Not really. I mean, not if your job is to affect local change and to educate on a local level. My biggest challenge with Nextdoor is that it's only permanent residents, and we have a very large transient population. So it's a spaghetti sauce theory. There's
Right.
not one answer for it. There's a lot of different answers. And that's just one platform that I know is verified residents by the post office box, or the post office address. So I think it's a great way to reach people who I know are in my county. Facebook gives you city lists and like what city has the most. I mean, some of the cities with our most followers aren't even in our county.
Right.
So it's good and bad.
I agree. All right. So what's it like being a PIO in an area where there's high tourism? It's a high tourism community.
Oh, I'll use spring break as an example because you kind of use it here. So I kind of took a different approach to this than my first 2 years. The first 2 years that I was here, we really were aggressively trying to address the spring break crowd because Panama City Beach is right next door in Bay County. And what Bay County did was they banned alcohol on the beach. And what we anticipated was this big exodus from Bay drowning over into or bleeding over into Walton. And we were trying to deter that because Walton County does not advertise themselves as a spring break destination. They never have. It's a higher end, really, tourism industry.
Right.
And not taking anything away from Bay. I live in Bay County. It's a beautiful place, but Walton County isn't really a place for college students, and there's not really a lot of places for them to go. So what we did the first 2 years I was here is I aggressively targeted like any article that came out that said, hey, spring break Walton County. And one in particular was Total Frat Move. It's this big website for fraternities. And they listed Walton County as a spring break destination, specifically Whale's Tail and Sandestin and Miramar Beach. That was the new spring break destination. So I wrote an open letter to Total Frat Move, and I was like, take that somewhere else. We don't want that here. My approach over the years changed because what I started to see was the kids would take their mugshots and use them as like, they think they're a martyr now,
God.
And it wasn't doing any good, So my thought process had to change, and you have to pivot when you see that occurring. So I was like, all right, how can I affect positive change? How can I make these kids understand that it's not a joke here? Like they will go to jail, they will get arrested. And we're just trying to deter sexual batteries, DUIs, anything, overdoses, all of those things. And what I started to do was tally the arrest by college, by university, by high schools. And I started to tag their high schools in my posts and the colleges. And you would not believe how quickly that would get the attention of administrative folks at these different schools. I'm probably public enemy number one for 2 Catholic high schools in Kentucky. They were not happy with me.
That's awesome.
But it did the job because then these schools were like, okay, we need to message that like Walton County is not messing around. Like they're embarrassing the school and holding the school accountable for when our students go down there and get arrested. So I kind of had to gear my messaging and listen, my sheriff ended up on ESPN in Louisville because they wanted to know why we were doing it and what our goals were. And it ended up, working. I got calls from school resource deputies that were like, all right, tell me how to message to these kids. Tell me what you want me to tell them. And I just, going over it. Hey, it's 58 miles from the beach to our jail. So get ready for an 8-hour day and it's going to stink.
That is a great way of dealing with it. That's an awesome way to pivot to it. Great job.
Yeah. It's tourism is always funny because they come in and then they leave, so you have to message in a way that you can reach them almost before they get here or after they leave. And it's not easy to do. Billboards can do, some, and so can like roadside signs, but they're not going to follow the social media account. Can you remember the last time you went on vacation and followed the social media account of like the last time I went skiing, I went to Lake Tahoe. Now, if I'm a normal citizen, I'm not following Lake Tahoe on social media, so you have to figure out how to reach them without, overstepping.
Barstool is a real good one to look at too. I follow that one quite a lot. As a matter of fact, my one son put me onto that one a couple of years ago. So
sure.
Definitely a good one. All right. So how has the pandemic changed things? It's changed things for first responders, obviously. How has it changed what you do in your job?
Well, I think it's made us hyper-focused on what messaging is important to the community and when to stay quiet. The health department here locally had their, was working with EM and working with the county and had their work cut out for them when this pandemic started. And we, at first, were trying to, help them publish numbers and things like that. But eventually we have to step away from that and go back to a law enforcement message and how we're handling things and what we're doing and how the public can hold us accountable. And as the pandemic continued, different things were important to people at different times. And we just had to really emphasize that. And again, I'm using that P word, the pivot word, because we had to keep pivoting like what was important to folks. And I think that really, it just changed my perspective on a whole lot of things, like scheduling. Like I don't schedule posts anymore because you just never know when things are going to happen, and you never know if it's going to stay relevant. I feel like you need to really hone in on your community's heartbeat, and it changes. And I think that another thing I learned is that storytelling is our greatest currency right now. It's pretty much all we have. And people want those heartfelt storytelling moments because they're so isolated. We're more connected than we've ever been, and we're more isolated than we've ever been. And it's a tough time.
It's a hard thing for some jurisdictions to understand the whole thing about storytelling and about humanizing things and connections.
Sure.
I watch it very often where the agencies, all they do is they just keep pumping out one message after another, and it's automated. Most of them are, and they're all the same message across all the platforms too, which is another no-no. And it just people just shut down and stop paying attention after a while.
Well, it becomes noise. I think it just becomes, it's like when you see the same commercial over and over again, you almost don't understand the point of it anymore. And I think it's important to not talk to people like, and I tell my deputies this, don't talk to people like you're like a cop. They want you to level with them, and they want to be able to relate to you, and telling stories helps do that. You can't be checking a box with social. It just doesn't work. And people don't absorb the message as well. It's almost like you're force feeding people. It's not something that you're hawking to your constituents. It's not a sales pitch. It's your message, your cadence, your voice, and it should sound like a person and not like a robot.
See, now that's the journalist coming out in you, and that's a good thing, because a lot of guys and girls that are still doing this are still law enforcement in some way, and they haven't learned that lesson about engagement the right way. They're very, very rigid. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. These are the rules.
Yeah.
So you've done some extensive brand work with Walton County. And you just did a whole presentation about staying on brand and maintaining a brand. So what is the importance of having a very defined brand from a law enforcement perspective?
Oof, I get chills talking about this because it's something I'm super passionate about it. And I think that it starts very, very in the early stages in-house. You've got to sit down with your command staff and sit down with your leadership and figure out like, what's our brand and what do we want it to be? And that needs to be ingrained from people who have been here for 20 years. And that needs to be ingrained in people who are walking through the door, so that as soon as they get hired, they understand what the expectation of the agency is, what our core values are, and that you're setting a standard. Because let's just say you have a kid and he's right out of the academy and he's passionate and he wants to kick in doors and he wants to bust bad guys, and you write less traffic citations and you change tires. And he's going to be like, boring. And my argument to that is there's a lot of agencies out there who have a warrior mentality. You can go work on a 24-hour SWAT team in Escambia or Osceola or Jacksonville, Miami-Dade. But here, this is what we're about. And this is what the community expects from us. Every brand is not going to be the same. And that's okay. And I usually get into that early on with the new hires. I teach a new hire academy. I teach an in-service academy. And I remind folks what our brand is and how they are to represent our brand. And that's not just when you're on duty. That's all the time. When you become a public servant, it's full time. When I was a journalist, I had to be unbiased full time. You can have an opinion, just keep it to yourself, because Lady Justice, checks and balances, she's got a blindfold on, folks. So that's how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to serve unbiasedly. And if that's a word, I think I just made a word. But I think that a brand is different for every organization. And once we've established that on an internal level, then we can start pushing those messaging out in a way that's productive to our brand. So For example, we don't tout arrests. We don't say we got room at the Green Roof Inn. Look, come visit our jail if you want to commit crime. We don't do that. Instead, we tout our jail programs because our mission over there is recovery, not recidivism. So we highlight our welding program. We highlight our heavy machinery operator program. We highlight that we're putting in a driving pad so these guys and gals can get their CDLs. They're human beings. There's 6 degrees of separation between a person in jail and a normal law-abiding citizen. So we try to, we have a sheriff here in Florida. His name's Grady Judd. Grady Judd is going to be sheriff for as long as he wants to be. What he does works there. It would not work in Walton County. And that's just something that you have to be able to identify and then project.
Is he the sheriff from Polk County?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. That's who it was. Okay. Yeah.
He's fantastic. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can't be Grady Judd in Miami-Dade.
Absolutely not. I
mean, it's not going to work. Another thing that I work on with branding is making sure that we have like a clean brand logo, and that everything that we do on our Facebook and social media comes from within the agency. I don't share memes. I don't share like every picture, every video, every, post. It's in-house. Like we create everything in here. I'm not going to spend too much time like sharing other people's stuff because I want everybody to know that what we're putting out is from us and from us only. The only other, I could talk about branding forever, but if you think about it, when you wake up in the morning, you use Colgate, you use Crest or Sensodyne or whatever toothpaste. If you decide one morning that you don't want to use that, you could go buy a different toothpaste. Like nobody's going to be knocking on your door like, hey, why didn't you buy Crest again? With a sheriff's office or a police department, your citizens don't have a choice in their law enforcement agency unless they move. And that to me makes you even more responsible to making sure that you're upholding and holding your deputies and police officers accountable to your brand, because people don't have a choice. You're it. And that makes you even more, accountable to the public. And if you don't like that, you need to find a different career, because that's where we're going. People want to be able to have a voice when it comes to their law enforcement agencies and who is serving them. And to be quite frankly, they should, because it's a public agency. It's not a private company. If I decide tomorrow that I don't want to go to Starbucks anymore, I don't have to go. But when I call 911, whoever's coming is coming, So I just feel like that needs to be understood as soon as you enter into law enforcement.
Great points. Great point. Are you using a style guide, or did you create a style guide?
Yeah, I created a style guide for the agency, and that really just talks about like color schemes and logos and tone and cadence and social media tips. And I sent it to the agency. Yeah.
That's great, because I think that's important. You see so many just simple things like the email tagline could be 10 different ways, and it drives you nuts. And then, the links don't work because they're not following the way it's supposed to be put down, and it makes it harder and harder for us to do our job when people leave from the style that you've already put together. So great points, and great points on staying on brand and understanding your brand. So I hope our listeners take point in that. So your jurisdiction has faced a lot of hurricanes over the years, and quite a few in the last year alone. So how do you go about with planning for it as a PIO, the messaging that goes with it, and then operating in a storm?
Well, first, I just want to specify that, Bay County and Gulf County, this last Hurricane Michael, that hit us. I know, Sally, it did hit us in Okaloosa and Santa Rosa Beach, but we really, in Walton County, we really, really, I hate to say lucky, because I don't believe in luck, but we were really very fortunate that we didn't get the worst of it. Hurricane Michael decimated Gulf and Bay County, and then Sally was just a royal pain as far as rain and weather. And Pensacola, Escambia County really got hammered the hardest out of that one. I think that, and I go back to relationships. I said it earlier. I think relationships are everything, and you need to have a great relationship with your emergency management. You need to have a great relationship with school districts and all of those things, because if you're not communicating, with each other and you can't message the same message, your public gets frustrated. I want to say it was a few years ago. I can't remember for the life of me what police department it was. I think that they were up, either in Alabama or Georgia. Ocoee, I think it was Ocoee County. They put Ocoee County is now responsible for determining if school is going to close. That's Ocoee County School District. If you have questions about school closures, contact the Ocoee County School District. And they tagged the school district over and over again.
No.
It was almost like they were frustrated because the school district hadn't said whether or not they were closing school.
Right.
And that to me is just like, oh,
yeah, that's not the way to,
with your school district,
Yeah.
It was a funny way to get people to stop calling dispatch. Right. But it was kind of like a, hey man, you gotta pick up the phone and call the PIO over there and just kind of build relationships. And when we talk about hurricane, I think again, going back to understanding what is your community going to ask? What are they going to want to know? How are you going to put their minds at ease and staying in your lane, right? As a PIO, my lane is public safety. So I'm not going to be talking about where sandbags are and what the evacuation route is and all of that. I'm going to be talking about, hey, this road is closed. We have a deputy there. It's unsafe to be in this area. I'm going to talk about all sorts of things that have to do with public safety. That's it. And leave the other messaging to other organizations and point people in the right direction. I think that's really important. I deployed to Gulf County after Hurricane Michael to help Sheriff Harrison over there. And I would be lying to you if I said that something prepared you for how to operate after a storm. Like, I just don't think that anything prepares you for the lack of devastation or the lack of like normal everyday things. Social media is irrelevant almost. You have to figure out ways to communicate with people that are warm. And it's tough. I mean, I was literally creating flyers when I deployed to the Keys after Hurricane Irma to hand out at point of distribution. They were handing out water in my flyers. So you just have to figure out really unique ways to communicate with people when the power's out. Man, it's tough. And then once other agencies come in to help, then you have to manage them. Then you have to manage their message. Like, hey, a county that's coming in with cadaver dogs to try to find bodies, like you can't be posting that on your social. That's our messaging. And, you got to kind of control that too. So there's a lot that goes into that. We could talk for 2 hours about that. But I got to commend, Bay County did a great job after Hurricane Michael, and Pensacola Police Department. They were just a riot after Hurricane Sally. They had a bunch of barges break loose, and they were just letting the barge company have it. They got a lot of attention after Hurricane Sally. So.
The only reason I wanted to bring it up is because, people that listen to this podcast, they're from all over the country. So they don't necessarily have to deal with, what you guys deal with during the summer and the winter months or the fall months. Up here, we deal with snow, what's going on in the East Coast right now. So, and extreme cold. So the messaging is different, but yet alone, it's still similar in what you have to do to, and learn to stay in your lane. I like that point you make there. So kudos to that. All right. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about strategic communication plan. It's, the beginning of the year, a lot of agencies are moving into that plan. Can you describe your department's plan a little bit? Just give me the overview. Like, is it a 1 year, multi-year? And then when do you guys sit down with your leadership for the plan?
Well, I actually just had a goals meeting with my sheriff. So I'm very fortunate because I answer directly to CAR 1. So we sit down and we have a goals meeting on, what I'm trying to accomplish over the next year. And I think it goes back to branding. My communication strategy is to earn a currency of trust. And we call it that because it's like a bank account. You have to earn it. And our strategy has always been totally and complete transparency in earning that currency. So if one of our people gets arrested, we're sending out a press release. If, we make a mistake, we're owning it. And that strategic communication plan, and, I'm not big into paper. I think it's a waste of time. I would make an argument, and Adam Merrick from the Carolinas would probably faint if he heard me say this, but press releases are kind of dying. A well-written post or a well-written piece of storytelling is great, but strategic communication plans, like this goes back to branding. This isn't like a year-to-year plan. This is your Bible. Like, how are you going to operate from like here on out? And that should only change when your leadership changes. So for me, my sheriff just got reelected. So, and I know what his goals are. I know how he wants me to communicate. I don't know that we have. I don't know that I put that plan down on paper, because I think in law enforcement things ebb and flow so much. It would be so hard to do that. It would be so hard to say, this year I want to do 6 tweet from the beats and have like this night, and then we have a traffic crash that shuts down I-10 for 12 hours, and I'm like, well, can't do this today. I think it's hard to have a plan. It's hard to have a plan in this business because you never know what your day is going to look like.
This is true. But strategic communication plans are not necessarily always just an individual event. It's your, like you said, it's that knowing what the sheriff wants and knowing that you have plans to do certain things and you have a way of doing it. So, and that is what you do for your entire year. Or your 2 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's really what it is. You cannot fly by the seat of your pants in this job. You have to have some basis for to do well at it, period.
Sure.
So that's why I threw that in there. All right. So personally, what is your favorite go-to social media platform and why?
Oh, this is so tough. I mean, professionally, my favorite. From a law enforcement standpoint, I think it would be Nextdoor, only because here's a little secret. It's forward facing. So I can't see what other people are posting. And quite frankly, I don't want to see it. Right? We have so much stuff coming in. It's like we're like it's like sensory overload all the time. And when I get onto Nextdoor, I post when I need to post, and I could see people's responses to it. And that's all I really want to see. I mean, and the targeting just is so great, I think, for a law enforcement agency. Personally, I'm a Twitter and Instagram nut. I don't even have a Facebook. Full transparency, I have a Facebook for work, and I have one friend on it, and it's a girl I work with. So absolutely hate Facebook. Would burn it to the ground if I could, just because there's so many good things about it, but there's so many more, just aggravating things about it. And it changes so much. The platform is not intuitive. Like, they send you to creative suite for this and then producer for this. And then, it's not simple anymore.
No, it's
not.
And
in a job where you have to wear 50 hats, you want simple.
Agree.
Twitter is my jam. I love Twitter because
Twitter is mine.
I have this quote that I always say. I'm like, Facebook makes you hate the people that you know. Twitter makes you love people that you've never met. And Instagram just makes you hate yourself because you want to be everybody else. So, I mean, it's just like, I don't know what the lesser of the evils is, but I like Instagram and Twitter. And I like Instagram and Twitter for the SO too, but I don't use any of them the same. I really don't. You're going to see content on Instagram that I would never put on Twitter or Facebook, and vice versa.
And that's the way it should be. You should never be using the same layout, period.
Don't link your social media.
Yes. It's a great point. All right. So what kind of training did you get to be a PIO for your department?
What kind of training did I get?
Well, you were a journalist, so basically,
if people could see my face on your podcast, I think that being a journalist helped, coming in and knowing what to expect from reporters and trying to communicate that to command, like, hey, this isn't an all day affair. They literally need 5 minutes of your time. Like, we're going to have a press conference about this. We don't need to have a press conference about this. Like, we don't need to make this a big deal. Like, to me, for training, I can tell you the two most valuable training opportunities that I received was government social media conference, which if you go to one government social media conference, if you are able to attend one, it'll ruin you for every other conference because they spoil you. It's so interactive. They do prizes every day. They feed you. It's like the best experience ever. They have a law enforcement track that you can follow. You meet all sorts of people. And that, I think Christy Dalton does a great job at those conferences. And they're bar none. FLIPIOA for me in Florida Law Enforcement Public Information Officers Association is also a great training opportunity, great networking. I love Mike Jackals, who puts on the Florida Fire Chiefs Public Information Officers Association. He does a great job with that. But I've done the basic PIO course and the advanced course for FEMA. And that kind of teaches you how to operate in a JIC and the EOC part of being a PIO. But a lot of it, I just really learned by trial and error and listen and looking at other agencies that I admire. Mountain View Police Department does a great job.
Oh my God. Yes.
And if I want humor, I go to Lawrence, Kansas. If I want, ideas, I follow Jacksonville County Sheriff's Office. I think that we can all learn so much from each other. I am not the best at my job. I'm never going to be the best at my job. There are a lot of professionals out there that I can learn from. And I think once I get to a point where I'm not learning anymore, I'm not being a very good steward of public service. So I think that if I was to tell you what the best training was, it's just to mirror and try to learn from other agencies that are doing it well.
Great points. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Last good book you read.
Oh, that's a great question. I have so many. So I'm a Patriots fan. And we just lost my quarterback and he's going to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a Tom Brady fan, but I'm always going to be a Pats fan. And he got me reading the 4 Agreements. And for any PIO, you have to read that book because listen, it really, the 4 Agreements are so simple, but one of them is don't take things personally. And it really walks you through how to have thick skin and like when you are taking things personally, what it does to you. And I had to learn early on in this career to disassociate myself from the brand, even though I took it very seriously, because when people are mad at the agency, they're not mad at you. They're just mad. Right. And that was a tough thing to learn because I am so passionate about this job. But the 4 Agreements is a fantastic book. And it's kind of Toltec spirituality wisdom, but the points that it's making are bar none. That's a really great book. And I just bought Michael J. Fox's book.
Okay.
So I'm really interested to that. Matthew McConaughey, Green Lights. That's an awesome book.
I read that book. It's a very good book.
Yes.
All right. Favorite television show to binge watch?
Okay. So I need to preface this by saying that I hate television, but my mom got me watching Yellowstone and I finished it in like 2 weeks. It was over. Game over. Like 2 weeks. And then once I finished it, I was like, I got to wait till June. Like, what is this? This is why I don't watch shows because I get too emotionally invested. And then I can't do it.
Well, that's the advantage of regular TV because you have to wait week to week. And as opposed to being able to watch them all the whole series at once. That's that's the hardest thing that I get when I pick a show to watch. I'm like, oh, I went through the whole thing already. Now I gotta wait.
What do I do now? Yeah.
Exactly. Favorite food?
Oh man. I love food. I just love food. And then I just had this conversation with somebody at lunch. Like, I feel like if I didn't work out, it would be bad because I just love all sorts of food. If you were to ask me what my favorite food is, I would just say Thanksgiving Day. Like everything that I eat on Thanksgiving is my favorite food. Like mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, turkey, stuffing, like anything my mom cooks on Thanksgiving Day. I just want to eat it.
That's awesome. All right. So let's wrap it up. Anything else you want to share?
I really believe in public service. And I think that this is such an honorable profession. And I think that if you have in mind that you're really just trying to make your deputies and your firefighters or your dispatchers or your child protective investigators, if you're really just trying to find the good in what they do on a day-to-day basis that people might not know, I think that that's the most important part of our jobs, because people need to hear these stories, and you owe it to the people that you work for. So I always say when I call dispatch, I'm like, hey, it's Corey, it's your PIO. I'm their PIO. That's what I'm doing. I'm at their service just as much as I am at the public service. So I think it's important to remember that you're serving your agency as well as the public.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate everything, and I appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.
Super pumped. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.
Take care. That was Corey Dobridnia. I hope everybody enjoyed this week's podcast. See you next time.